But if there were to be prophets and prophetesses and messengers in today's world, it would make perfect sense if some of them would be filmmakers. Movies and music are in some ways the language of creativity and the language of guidance for many, many people.
Welcome to the Sufi Heart podcast with Omid Safi, featuring teachings and stories from the wisdom of the Islamic tradition. Omid invites you to a meditation on the transformative power of love and recalling the necessity of healing our own hearts through healing the world. If you'd like to support Omid's podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/Omid.
Right. Well, those of you who have been with us for a period of time, you would know that we have been undertaking a beautiful journey through the stories of the prophets. We have gone through some of the tales of Hazrat Adam and Hazrat Hawa, Hazrat Ibrahim, Hazrat Nuh, and slowly, also coming to Hazrat Moses, alayhi salam. We have had a preview of the birth of the Prophet Muhammad and indeed of the mothers of the prophets. Today, if you are looking at the calendar, you might notice that it is May the 4th. So, is it possible that we moved some things around for the nerds among us so that we could have an occasion to say, May the 4th be with you? And in fact, to devote today's session to talking about the Sufi underpinning of Star Wars. Yes, indeed, absolutely. We did move some things around because the idea of being together for May the 4th was too good to pass up. But fear not, this is still very much a continuation of the journey that we have been on and continue to be on. The story of Moses in the Qur'an is in many ways one of the most elaborate stories of the prophets. Hazrat Musa is named more frequently than any other figure in the Qur'an. It's interesting, right? We sometimes would think that, the Qur'an should be primarily concerned with the chosen one, with the Prophet Muhammad. And of course, the whole entire scripture and recitation bears the fragrance of the one through whom it's revealed. But as far as narratives go, no, it's actually the stories and the mentions of Musa, alayhi salam, of Moses, who stands at the heart of the Abrahamic traditions that dominates, in some ways, the landscape of the Qur'an. And there's many different accounts. The deliverance of the people of Israel, his encounters with the Pharaoh, which we've dealt with a little bit. And then there is that mysterious character in the Qur'an named Khidr. And that's going to call for us to deal with that encounter of Moses and his mystical guide, this mysterious teacher. He's unnamed in the Qur'an, but the tradition calls him the Green One. The Green One, Khidr, or Khadr, or Khizr in the Eastern languages. And as a little preview of where we're going to go in our next gathering, think about this. Here is one of the greatest messengers of Allah. Here is the archetypal Rasul, the recipient of the Torah. And he is actually the one who is being instructed. He's the one who's being schooled in a real sense by the green one. So it tells you that whatever we tend to think of as ordinary, conventional religion, there are deeper realms within. And those are, of course, some of the realms that we are aspiring to explore. Well, today's session is going to take us to another green one. And that green one is the one that in our Sufi tradition, we refer to as Hazrat Yoda, His Holiness Yoda. We will talk about ways in which myth makers, the great myth makers, are at the heart of reviving the spiritual traditions of today. One of my great teachers in the Sufi tradition once said something in passing, which is that when you read the Qur'an, each of the prophets appeared in the language that the people of their time understood. So Moses is given the gift of miracles at a time where magic was featured in the court of the Pharaoh. Christ was given the gift of healing, healing the sick and even bringing people back to life, since that was a dominant form of demonstrating spiritual power. And of course, the chosen one, the Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam, he was given the unique gift for people for whom language was the way that the sacred was expressed, of being given this recitation, this scripture, which is uniquely inimitable. And there was a challenge issued forth. Come up with a passage like this if you can. And that challenge has gone unmet. And what the teacher of mine said in passing was, of course, we know that the chosen one is the last of the messengers, but if there were to be prophets and prophetesses and messengers in today's world, it would make perfect sense if some of them would be filmmakers. Movies and music are in some ways the language of creativity and the language of guidance. For many, many people, many of us still love books. We are nerds. We love to read books and discuss books. And as Rabbi Heschel once said, to become text people who have taken the wisdom of books into our bones, into our hearts. But movies and music have a particular role. And this is, in fact, what the director of Star Wars, George Lucas, had to say. He said that the reason that he made the series was, and I quote, to awaken a certain kind of spirituality in young people. To awaken a certain kind of spirituality in young people. There was a recognition that many people had become, over the course of the 20th century, alienated from religion for very good reasons. We all can imagine some of it. And it's the filmmakers, in some ways the musicians, who are able to speak that language that resonates with folks. So what we want to do is we want to explore and take seriously this notion. What if there are some of us, many of us, and many folks out there for whom conventional, traditional institutions of religion no longer appeal to them at a formative stage of their life for lots of good reasons. Nationalism, tribalism, racism, patriarchy, elitism, hierarchy, have permeated the very foundations of so many different religious traditions and institutions. And then they come across something like the Force. And that opens up a certain portal for them and for us. And for many people, it's this kind of a language, this mythic language, which in many ways is drawing together themes from different religious traditions, so that Taoists see themselves in the Force, and so do Muslims, and so do many Christians and people of other faith traditions. So we want to take that part seriously. So, as you know, in our Chai love and prayer sessions, we always begin with a gift of sacred music. Well, what if today the sacred music that we want to start with happens to be a scene from Star Wars? A little caveat here. I'm what you would call, jokingly, I say this, a Salafi Star Wars nerd. So really, I recognize the original 3 and see everything else that has come afterwards, and a lot of the spin-offs and the endless merchandising and Disney buying it over as something of a innovation and perhaps even a benevolent innovation at times. But I stick to the classics in many ways. And the way that I watch Star Wars for the most part is I skip through most of the scenes until I get to the Yoda scenes and concentrate on those. And that's what we're going to do today, with one exception, so that nothing is frozen in time. Every tradition is a living tradition. And so we're going to begin actually with one of the later ones. Bismillah. Let's see. Second. Screen. Okay. The sound somehow. I share sound. All right. Okay, so we begin with Ya Hazrat Yoda in proper fashion. Wishing everyone that May the 4th be with you. And here we go. So this is from The Rogue.
I can't. It's too big.
Size matters not. Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you? And where you should not. For my ally is the Force. And the powerful ally it is. Life leads it. Makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us. And binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. Here, between you, we, the tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes, even between the land and the ship.
We want to take seriously this notion that what we think of as creation, as being, as existence, is mysteriously a unified phenomena. And that's an insight that we get in so many mystical traditions. The Tao, of course, being the fundamental Taoist version of it, but also in the Sufi tradition, the expression of Wahdat al-Wujud, the unity of being, the unity of existence. And that there is something mysterious about the fundamental relationship that all of existence has with one another. And the first part is to begin by recognizing that everything is in fact not a thing. There is no such thing as a thing. There is no such thing as an inanimate object. Everything is animated. Everything sings. Everything rejoices. That's what we get from people like Maulana Rumi when he says, to you, earth, wind, fire, and air, the four classic elements, they appear as dead. But in the sight of Allah, they are living. Everything has a John, everything has a soul, everything has a life force. And we ourselves are part of this matrix of wujud, of existence. That word matrix, of course, has an origin that also connotes the feminine. There's somehow this creative mesh that we are immersed in, and we're not apart from it. We are a being that contains the whole universe inside of us. We are made of the earth. Water flows through us. We eat sunlight. Every energy that we receive physically has come from the sun. And we breathe air, and the breath of Allah is actually breathed inside of us. Our relationship to the natural cosmos is one of unity. What we do to the earth, we also do to ourselves. There is no separation. And that notion of existence or reality, wujud, in the Sufi tradition is always linked to wajd, which is ecstasy, genuine joy. If we recognize that we are of the earth, of water, of fire, of air, and of Allah, no separate existence, then how could you ever be alone? When the whole universe is of you and in you and through you. So to be one with the force, to be one with the universe, brings that element of absolute serene ecstasy. That is also part of the spiritual experience. Now, in the Islamic tradition, of course, we want to think about a mysterious relationship between Allah and creation. On one hand, as Ibn Arabi says, huwa wa la huwa. It is God and not God. In as much as everything is facing towards Allah, only Allah exists. And as the sages have always said, in the beginning there was Allah, in the end there shall be Allah, and it is now as it has ever been. So from one point of view, only God exists. And in as much as we turn our face towards each other and towards creation, then our being, our reality, our existence is also something that is gifted from God. We're also real, and we're here. God and not God. We just got back from a beautiful journey to Morocco and Spain, where we had many weeks of getting to discuss some of these beautiful teachings. And to be out in the desert, to have your feet in the water of an oasis, reminds you of just how part of this natural phenomena we are. But we want to get to Yoda. What does it mean to think about the Force being with you? So often we think about the urge to find our place in the universe. But what if the right question is actually to figure out that we are the universe? We do not go out into nature. We ourselves are nature. And indeed, as we're going to see towards the end, this notion of being one with the Force and the Force being one with us is an extraordinarily liberating and powerful one. So there is a power to the Force. But that's not the only power there is. So one of the things that George Lucas is doing is that he's asking a lot of those beautiful questions in this very subtle and open-ended way. He says at one point, he's not interested in giving people the answer to their religious dilemmas. He says, but I want to make young people think about the mystery. I want to make young people think about the mystery. And that word mystery, or sir, is the same word that we use in the Sufi tradition for the innermost part of our hearts. And the language of Star Wars, at its best, is an invitation to explore the mystery of the universe and of our own souls. So let's see how that works. Well, we talked about how in the Qur'an, there's the story of Moses and Khidr. Khidr means green, the ever-living. And Khidr in the Qur'an, and in the later tradition that emerges from it, is usually described as being an ancient figure, one who is perhaps even ever-living. And we see this in Star Wars. How long has Hazrat Yoda been training Jedis? He says 800 years. The green, which is not just the color of Islam, it's not just the color of the Prophet's mosque. The green is the color of life itself. And what if we come to realize that one of the names of Allah is Al-Hayy, which is the living? What if every living that we see is something that is alive in God and through God? There's a reason why Yoda is green. And there's a parallel between the experience that Luke has with Yoda, with the experience that Moses has with Khidr. We're going to see next session, when we read that Quranic account very closely, that Moses keeps questioning Khidr. And Khidr eventually grows impatient with Musa. What does it mean if a mystical teacher, a spiritual guide, is impatient with one who is himself the prophet of God? Hold that as a mystery, and we'll come to it. And so here's another mysterious green one. Judge me by my size, do you? When we meet Yoda, Luke is on a quest to find this great warrior who's going to teach him the ways of the Force. Perhaps he's going to make him a great warrior. And when he first encounters Yoda, he doesn't recognize him as the Jedi Master that he's been searching for. Do we have an inner eye to recognize the teachers and the guides in our life? In the Naqshbandi tradition of Central Asia, there's a spiritual practice. With every person that you come across, treat them as if they might be Khidr. Treat them as if possibly they could be your mystical guide, that they could have something to offer you spiritually in terms of the teachings. What do you expect your teacher to look like? Do you expect them to have a halo? Do you expect a certain kind of charisma? Do you expect miracles? You expect them to be male? You expect powers and ostentatious displays of spiritual gift? What if they're humble? What if they're old? What if they're female? What if they assume everyday roles of love and service in ways that do not particularly stand out? When we were in Morocco, I shared with our friends one of the insights that Ibn Arabi has, which is that the greatest saints that he met were everyday, ordinary shopkeepers. He says this in a book called Ruhul Qudus, the Holy Spirit. He says one of them was so modest and humble that when he would enter a room, no one noticed him. And when he would leave, no one would notice that he had left. He says, I recognized his rank, and I saw what a great saint he was. And he saw me seeing him. And he came up to me and said, I like you. I like you, and I would like for us to be friends. Keep my secret a secret, and I will keep your secret a secret. This is part of the encounter of Luke and Yoda, that Luke has come looking for a great mighty warrior, and instead he finds this old, petite, not at all impressive and imposing looking character who in the beginning has a very joking character. He laughs like a child and even plays some mischievous pranks on him. Now, we live in an age where, for very good reason, spiritual hierarchy, religious authority is something that we have come to be very suspicious of. There's not a tradition in the world which hasn't had its scandals of money, sex, power, greed, corruption. And the more suspicious we become about traditional religious authority, the more of a lacuna that leaves in our hearts. And so we turn to movies, we turn to popular mythology to fill its gap. So you see Dumbledore in Harry Potter. You see Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. And of course, you see Hazrat Yoda in Star Wars. Those are the three friends who sit right by that table over there. You could say that we have this primordial fitri impulse to learn not only from our peers, but also from living ancestors. If you speak Persian and Urdu, you would think this is hilarious. We don't want to just learn from our peers, we want to learn from peers. Peer is what we call sheikh in those Eastern languages. And the less genuine mystical guides we have, at least visible to us in conventional religious organizations and institutions, the more we are turning towards myth. We still have a need for it. There's a great miniature artist who has even started depicting Star Wars in that ancient Persian and Ottoman tradition here. So Darth Vader is sitting there in the tradition of a sultan smelling a rose. You see the ecstatic dancing young female dervish in the background. And there is Hazrat Yoda with the halo engulfing him with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the young dervish, the young seeker as well. So here's a true story. Years ago, more than maybe 15 years ago, as kind of an inside joke, I put up a Facebook post saying, I can no longer keep this a secret. I am announcing the creation of a new Sufi order, the Jedi Sufi order, Tariqa Yodawiya, the Tariqa of Yoda. And it was kind of just a tongue-in-cheek comment acknowledging that there's a lot of us for whom the language of Yoda, the language of the Force, has been really important in our own spiritual growth. What I couldn't have imagined was that people took this quite seriously. And I got thousands of messages from people. I too wish to become initiated in the Tariqa Yodawiya. I too aspire to be a Sufi Jedi. Where can I offer my bay'ah, my initiation? So eventually I just let it go, and it's taken on its own direction. But I still think my one of my bio lines somewhere says, Jedi wannabe. And it's true. I think the Jedis are about as compelling of a modern translation for what it is to aspire to be a Sufi warrior in today's world. To be someone whose heart is inclined towards Allah and towards love, but also with a commitment to standing up for justice and defending the vulnerable. So let's see where this journey is going to take us to. Part of Luke's training is to meet not just Yoda, but Obi-Wan. And this glance, this moment, this exchange between Luke and Obi-Wan, apprentice and master, this is the very stuff of the Sufi tradition. This is part of that re-enchanting that Star Wars is trying to accomplish. It's trying to remind us that there are these mysterious ways of the heart, of the soul, of the universe that we can still learn. Even if much of the world seems to have bypassed it, even if much of the world seems to be enamored of a kind of soulless technology. But the Force is still there, and the Jedi's, fewer and far between, are still there for those who aspire to them. And there's something about the appearance of Obi-Wan, which I think for those of us who come from the Islamic tradition is really important. George Lucas chose to film each one of the three classics in Tunisia and nearby Morocco. And you can still go to the places that were filmed, still called Star Wars Valley. And if you take a look at how the Jedi's dress, this is the way that both saintly and everyday ordinary Tunisians and Moroccans dress. The jalaba becomes the Sufi robe. I remember the first time that I went to Morocco, it took my breath away because half of the men were dressed like Jedis. And it's a powerful thing to realize that next to our skin, clothing is the most intimate part of our apparel. It's the closest way that we interact with the universe. When you take a look at the way that Obi-Wan dresses and what he's wearing, well, it's exactly what North African, Algerian, Moroccan sheikhs like Sheikh al-Alawi would dress. The only thing really that's missing is the tasbih, is the misbah. But everything else, right down to the walking staff, which is, of course, part of prophetic tradition, is straight out of that Islamic tradition. There's a funny account that Ewan McGregor, who played the younger Obi-Wan in some of the later episodes, after the filming of his episodes where fame was getting to be too much for him, he goes on a long motorcycle ride across many countries. There's a documentary that's even made about it. And he has an accident and ends up in a place in Kazakhstan, in a building that he doesn't know. And he describes it as the most beautiful and tranquil building inside and out. And a powerful spiritual experience that he has in this building. This is all true. It's all in that documentary. Well, the building that he's describing is this. It is the Sufi shrine of Sheikh Ahmad Yesawi, the founder of one of the most important of the Sufi orders. And George Lucas, in order to research the culture, the mystical culture of the place that he's filming, he had met with a lot of Sufis in California. The best information that we have, it's the Habibiyya order, the followers of Sheikh Muhammad ibn Habib, a Moroccan Sufi sage. So there's very direct connections between the Sufi tradition and what shows up in Star Wars as well. How does this relate to the Force? Let's have a look here.
No. We'll never get it out now.
So certain are you? Always with you what cannot be done. You know nothing that I say.
Master, moving stones around is one thing. This is totally different.
No different. Only different in your mind. You must unlearn what you have learned.
All right, I'll give it a try.
No, why not? Do. Or do not. There is no try.
More than 30 years ago, I had gone to see the late Martin Lings, Abu Bakr Sirajuddin, not just a scholar of the Sufi tradition, but really a saintly being himself. He, of course, is the author of what I still think is the single best book on the life of the Prophet Muhammad. I cold called him as a 21-year-old on what I now refer to as my Sufi hunting trip. I was looking for a sheikh and got his phone number somehow. That's a separate story. And called his house and asked if I could come see him. And he asked me how old I was. And I said, 21, 22. And he said, oh, you're a young man. Why don't you go and live for a few decades and come back? And I was like, no. You see, I'm going back to America in 4 or 5 days. So I have to come see you now. He agreed. I went to his house, stayed with him for a few hours. And the whole time it was just one gracious, beautiful, luminous teaching after another, until at some point I asked the stupid question. And you know how people sometimes say, there's no such thing as a stupid question. There is, actually. Sometimes when you haven't learned the lesson, when you're not listening, you can ask stupid questions. And so all of a sudden, his face changed from this gracious, grandfatherly sage, and there was no malice in it. It was just pure observation. And he said, have you learned nothing of everything that I have been telling you and everything that you have been reading in books? Have you learned nothing? And really, that one statement, I still remember the impact that it had on my heart. And I didn't take it as an insult or an attack. It was an observation. And that statement did more for my heart to really knock off some dust and some dirt from it. Rumi describes this as sometimes you hang a carpet in the yard and you beat it with a stick, not because you're mad at the carpet, but to get the dust to come off of it. And then he went right back to being the warm and gracious person that he had been. So when you see Yoda in this state of frustration with a young Luke, who's not yet a Jedi, you're not listening. You're not learning. There is no difference between a stone and getting a spaceship out of the mud. There is no try. Do or do not. Do or do not. So what does that remind you of? Well, in the Islamic tradition, we are told that when the Habib is in a battle of Badr, and he picks up a handful of dirt and he throws it towards the enemy, in the Qur'an it is described as, it wasn't you that threw, but we threw what you threw. Like, the human being really becomes empty, and you become a vehicle, a receptacle for carrying out that divine will, which is harmonious with the universe. So let go of do and do not. Let go of, I'm going to try. I'll do my best. The goal of the path and the goal of the Jedi is to actually harmonize your will with the will of Allah, so that there's no I in it anymore. I think this might be one of our last scenes that we will see.
Run! Yes, Jedi strength flows from the Force, but beware of the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force are they. Easily they flow, ready to join you in a fight. If once you start down the dark path, forever will dominate your destiny. Consume you it will, if it be Obi-Wan's apprentice.
Vader. Is the dark side stronger?
No. But the easier, more seductive.
But how am I to know the good side from the bad?
You will know when you are calm, at peace, passive. A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
But tell me why I can't...
No, there is no why. Nothing more will I teach you today. Clear your mind of questions.
The way that ordinary teaching is done is through accumulating more and more knowledge. We are instructed in the Socratic method, lots of question and answer and probing. We read books, and once you're done with that, you read more books. You watch a documentary, and then you watch another one, or you listen to a podcast, and then you listen to another one. And Instagram and YouTube love to send you down an endless rabbit hole where one thing just lends itself to another. But the Sufi way and the way of the Jedi is a little different. It's about unlearning. It's actually about an insistence that as we are born, as we are created, we already have all the wisdom and all the knowledge. Part of what we're trying to do is to get back to that original state. That we picked up some bad habits along the way. And we have to unlearn them to get back to that childlike state of innocence. That can be really unsettling because we've gotten so accustomed to thinking that we can only progress through more and more and more questioning. But what about this? And what about that? And at some point, the Khidr character, the Yoda character, says, no more questioning. I will teach you no more today. And in fact, when next week we get to the story of Moses and Khidr, we see that endless line of questioning is eventually what leads to the parting of ways between the young apprentice messenger, Musa, and the mystical guide, Khidr. Of course, in our day and age, and there's also a lot of wisdom for boundaries, for verification. You want to be cautious about a situation in which someone, anyone, particularly someone in a position of authority, is asking you to surrender your will, surrender your discernment. Particularly, I think, for women, that's a crucial, life-saving insight to keep in mind. And it's also helpful to ask ourselves that question, am I going to progress through a parade of questioning and the what about? Is there a time to receive, to process, to absorb? Is there a virtue in balancing being active and being receptive? We're so used to seeing receptivity as being passive. But what if we come to see it as being receiving, giving and receiving, waves coming from an ocean to the shore and receding back to the ocean?
kuş değilim, bir dediler Süleyman kuş değilim.